We want to pick up this conversation by talking a little bit about the interreligious, interfaith dialogue that's going on around the world as an increasing manifestation of an integral consciousness that's basically irreversibly here to stay. And one of the things that I found, which I think is very gratifying, is that so many of the youth are coming in at an integral orientation really quite early. And I think this is incredibly encouraging. A lot of them get involved in Integral Institute and other ways trying to give expression to an integral awareness that they already have. At the same time, it faces all of the obstacles of the earlier types of religion or spirituality and the prejudices against those. Some of these prejudices are well-founded. For example, we were talking about there's archaic religion, there's magic religion, there's mythic religion, there's mental religion, there's integral religion, and higher. And the Western Enlightenment, which was a religion of science, a religion of rationality, came in to combat the religion of myth. Now, myth in the very concrete, literal sense. All myths, as Joseph Campbell pointed out, are ethnocentric. And so Voltaire's battle cry for the Enlightenment was, remember the cruelties. Remember the cruelties that a mythic god had inflicted on hundreds of thousands of people in the name of love. So the difficulty here is the great liberal vision was that the state shall not be allowed to impose any version of the good life on its citizens. We sometimes summarize this as the separation of church and state. That part is good and well, because what it means is the separation of governing policies from mythic religious dogma. That's extremely important that that happen. Mythic dogma isn't bad, it's appropriate station of life, but it can't be allowed to be the governing force in a world-centric democratic organization. The problem with that is that liberal societies, therefore, don't yet have a really fine-tuned understanding of post-conventional or trans-rational aspects of spirituality, which certainly include deep contemplative truths and awareness. So whenever they hear spirituality, they basically come up with Voltaire's battle cry, remember the cruelties. And they think that if we want to talk about spirituality, we're either Jerry Falwell or somebody like that trying to cram a fundamentalist view of God down their throats. And it's understandable that they would have that reaction. The part of the public relations dilemma of coming up with integral spirituality and spirituality that deals with these deeper, higher dimensions is to find ways to present those to the world at large in a way that diffuses their very legitimate concerns that this is some other form of ethnocentric, oppressive mythology and dogma. So it's not an easy task, and Stuart Davis, many of you know, is just a brilliant singer-songwriter and sort of the artist laureate of Integral Institute until we find a better one.
I'll kill him. Will you? I'll rub him out.
Well, you could share it.
And he's been one of the few people, along with some of our friends like Ed Kowalczyk, who's been trying to infuse music with a trans-rational spirituality, not a pre-rational mythic dogma form. And there are pluses and minuses to all of that. So we thought we would have this conversation as well and talk with Wayne and Stuart about some of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your sense, too, just in general, about the whole topic?
I do think that art is uniquely equipped to facilitate what you just described, because we're at a very tricky spot. There's definitely an unmistakable, potent, emergent population, and the integral force in the world, I think, is more palpable and sensible. Like 5 years ago, this felt to me, and maybe to you as well, and perhaps you'd agree with this, to be much more of something wafting through the air that was moving in some circles. But now it definitely feels and is experienced for me, not only in Boulder. We've seen this massive influx of people literally moving in great numbers to this part of the world to partake in Integral Institute, etc. But as I'm out traveling and doing shows all over the country, it's blowing my mind.
Changed,
I mean, there is a great number of people, and in the last 2 or 3 years, the numbers have ballooned, the activity has ballooned, and the conscious, explicit expression and exploration of it has increased in folds, definitely. But the tricky gift that comes with that emergent population and this threshold that we're on is this matrix that we're trying to, the quadrants, the levels, the lines, and all of the different levels of religion that you just spoke about, which is really just one dimension of this interface. And this, I think, is a new kind of artistic technology, actually, that's being developed, and not only just among painters and musicians and the traditional forms of artists, but Brother Wayne and yourself and all human beings accessing and unfolding this artistic dimension of themselves to make this happen.
Let's go back to the change in the last 5 years. And I'd like to talk with Brother Wayne about this as well too, because in the last dialogue that we had with Father Thomas, even though there has been this enormous impact, as we were saying, literally millions of people around the world have been affected by what Father Thomas is doing and centering prayer and contemplative outreach. He was still lamenting the fact that it was just a little bit harder to get to youth. That in some sense that was still a message that they were working with. Now, it's not all black or white. I mean, he's had an enormous impact on youth as well. But there has been a kind of change in openness to this. It's a matter of being able to repackage, in a sense, same wine to some degree in a new package. And that's what I find is so interesting. So, but really there has been this opening in the last couple of years where people are much more kind of conducive to this. And let me get your feedback on this to begin with. Just generically, how do you feel the outreach on the Christian contemplative side is going with youth?
Well, I think it's beginning to make progress now. I mean,
and when did you notice a shift, however?
Just in the last couple of years.
That's what we've noticed.
Yeah, last couple of years. And one of the things that I do is I teach all my students how to meditate, no matter what course I'm teaching. Comparative religion, mysticism, East and West, mysticism in the third millennium, ethics.
That's what we're doing at Integral University. You're taking mathematics, economics, art, the core courses, integral transformative practice.
In everything.
Yeah.
So, but I give them, I try to introduce them to that skill. Now, I always find out where they're at in the beginning of the course, like, what was your background?
Yeah.
And so you'll find 70% of them are Catholic, and there's some Protestants there and a few Jews, and maybe only 2 or 3 are practicing their tradition. But they're all interested in spirituality.
See, that's what's so interesting.
All of them. And then so I do 20 minutes of meditation in these classes. Or if it's a shorter class, I teach them the method, we do it, and then once in a while we do it. But in the 3-hour classes, we do 20 minutes or half hour each time. And so that's become a structure in their formation. And they begin to do it on their own, and it becomes part of their life. It becomes an anchor in their life, you see. And also the whole thing of trying to awaken them to an integral vision.
Yeah.
So I think the youth are more ready than some of the older generations.
Yeah. And it strikes me that, again, just to use the simple developmental scheme that we're using, which is, again, only one component, as Stuart said, of the much broader integral picture, but it's the one that often gets left out. So we try to touch bases with it because it helps clarify some of these issues. And again, not to pigeonhole people, but a skillful means of how to meet people where they are.
Right.
And a lot of youth aren't interested in mythic religion.
No.
They are interested in mental or integral religion.
Right.
And so that to me is a very interesting shift.
Right.
And so I think one of the things that's really incumbent is increasingly finding ways, and this is why I think art is exactly one of the ways to do it. When you can use that as a mode of expression to open people to integral spirituality, then that they respond very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And then it's not to say that it's therefore just easy. You can say, sort of, listen to a 3-minute song, and therefore you're, that's just the same as practice. But that's an opening and an expression. Then they can get involved in meditation or spiritual practice.
And as a context, and I wouldn't want to inflate it or exaggerate it too much, and to say that it's going to usurp the church or anything like that in the future. But I do think that art brings a context to the things that we're describing that is very much needed, because what you have in those kinds of populations that you're talking about, these kids that get it so fast, so early, it almost throws your bearings off.
It's
it
really
occurs
kind
so
of
fast.
weird.
For a while, you're almost like, is this real? Is it actually going to stick and hold? But it does.
Yeah.
And so there's that population. There's a much larger population that hasn't had the opportunity or the time to encounter it articulated explicitly in the ways that others have. And so what they come with is an incredibly astute but skeptical, mildly negative way. Of course, they're coming out of the deconstructive explosion, the Cambrian deconstructive explosion.
Boomeritis.
Yeah, exactly. So what they come to it with is, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, which isn't really a neti-neti thing. It's more of like there's...
Sifting.
Cynical, cynical, cynical.
Exactly. And so, but what is really, in my experience, feeding that is this deep ache. Right. Every human being carries the same longing for love.
Yes.
The same impulse informs every soul. And so that may be the way that they're interfacing with the world, but it drops very quickly when they see a way to directly experience, which is mysticism, something that will not be the magic or the mythic or the belief systems, or not excluding the belief systems, but not grounded in it exclusively. Right. And so when they encounter that, then the whole thing changes and shifts. And what I've found that is particularly useful for art is that it makes a nice transition. It is a nice navigator or midwife between the place of nothing and the negative, nothing's working, it's all a load of crap, to, oh, now I've landed in the new mystical framework of direct experience.
And nothing is the ground of possibilities, not the ground of despair.
Exactly. If there is a mysterious key or a secret that you've noticed in opening up those windows. And I love what you said earlier too about language and words, because really that opening just doesn't occur through convincing or... So what are the secret technologies or tools of the mystery that you've discovered in particular about youth in these decades of time?
I think...
what do they respond to?
Openness, vulnerability, and humor. You build a bridge of trust with them, and they will respond. A little humor, goes a long way. And you are a big risk taker when it comes to humor. You put yourself right out there. The thing is to get totally engaged with them. I've never been a professor to stand up on a podium. It's about kindness. Kindness opens every heart, unfailingly. The hardest-nosed skeptic who's totally closed, kindness will shatter that posture. Kindness, vulnerability, openness, intimacy with your audience. And I think you probably have a very good sense of how far you can go in stretching people, and I think youth like to be stretched. They need to be stretched. They have to be stretched. See what I'm saying? And kind of shake them a bit from their present assumptions to open them up and keep their minds open, their hearts open.
Part of the change I've seen in the last 5 years isn't just with the younger generation. It's an opening across all generations to this, because I think a very large number of people are moving into the integral waves, and therefore they're demanding this, they're talking about themselves, they resonate with each other, and they find each other. It's very interesting, because like finds like, and people broadcasting on that wavelength can hear each other miles away. It's like, what was that? And you end up finding each other. But I'm really encouraged by the 20-somethings and 30-somethings that just don't find, they are a monk in the world. They just can't really see it any other way. And it doesn't stop them from doing sanctuary. I mean, it's really appropriate to go away for 3 months sometimes or longer and do nothing but practice this particular exercise. But on balance, there's a less rigid separation. That it's not that we introduced it. The developmental view says just the opposite, which is that these early separations didn't corrupt a previous pristine state, but were growing expansions, moving bigger and bigger and bigger, but still not quite unified. So we're just sort of outgrowing some of these earlier separations where if you wanted to practice spirituality, you could only go into a monastery. And then if you wanted to do something, you could only do this. So we're outgrowing those and by putting them together. And so I think a monk in the world is sort of, the last sentence in the foreword that I wrote for years was that when this realization really becomes actual, then every sentient being will be a monk in the world.